Welcome GRD 121, Computer Graphics, to Exercise 12. This is going to be our wine bottle label, and this is the wine bottle exercise that I finished up, and I'm going to keep this open because I'm going to work on this and then resave it. And one thing I just want to show you, so I'm going to open up something else. You won't have this, but I'm going to open this from the cloud because I worked on this earlier just to give you an idea. This is called Sample, and this is just an idea of what the finished product should look like. Something like this. It doesn't have to look exactly like this. It doesn't have to be over the top as far as design, although looking at it now it looks a little like the Warren logo with that thing. You're just going to make a very conservative type logo using one of your leaves. You can do two designs, one with the oak leaf, one with the maple leaf, and just something like this. And I'll go over the design working with type a little bit, and we're just going to put it kind of on a label. We'll just use round corners on a rectangle, and we'll just bow the top and bottom a little bit so it looks like it's on the bottle. And I just have a little gradient on here that goes from kind of white to gray to white to gray to white a little bit, and I still put the glass in front of it so we have some depth to it. So that's pretty much what we're going to do. So this will be a short exercise. It'll be meant to kind of finish off your wine label so you have a little bit of design work on it other than just illustrating the bottle. So that's going to be kind of the finished product. So I'm going to close that up. That's called Sample, and I am going to open up another file, and can you guess which one we're going to open up? The leaves, the oak maple leaf. So hopefully you did that. So I'm going to do File, Open from Cloud, and I'm going to try to find my oak maple leaves, and I think this is it here. So I'm going to go to my exercise 7 oak maple and click on Open. And Gravit will let you open two files here, and these are on one page. All I'm going to do is click this one and hold Shift and click this one, or you could highlight through both of them. And I'm just going to copy, and then I'm going to close this up. And unless you want to make sure you paste it first, but I'm going to trust that it'll copy okay because I did Command-C. So I'm going to close that up, and I'm going to go here, and I'm going to make a new page because we're going to do logos on a new page of your wine bottle glass. So I'll go here and I'll create a new page, and I'll call that Logos. And I'll just do a paste, Command-V, and paste my leaves. Now before I do anything else, I should do a File, Save to Cloud As, and we'll make this a different file. So even if it saves some stuff that you already did in there, that's okay. But we're going to save as a different file, and I'm going to go down here and change the name to 12 Wine Bottle Label. I'll just replace glass with label. And I'll keep my name in there. I have my last name, first initial in there. So this will be the new file that we work on. So this is exercise 12, Wine Bottle Label. And you should just have one here, and it should sync. And one thing you can do, because we may move these things off to the side. If you ever move this off to the side and they get clipped, that's because when you click on the page, I'm just going to click on the page, the background, they have a setting here called Clip Content. And I'm going to turn that off because you may want to use this as kind of like a pasteboard area to kind of keep things to the side. So we're going to do a couple designs here in the middle. And I'll just do real quick things, nothing real over the top. I'll just give you some basic design advice. And my advice for design right off the bat is this. Make sure you contrast. In other words, contrast things that are big and small, contrast things that are warm and cool, styles, contrast a serif and a sans serif. You could do things like that. So make sure you have some contrast, and then also keep things unified, keep them together, just like if you got dressed, and the guys could understand this too. Let's say you were going to get dressed and you had a navy sweater on, you might wear khaki pants. There's a warm and cool, but they go together because they're both kind of dress casual kind of things. You wouldn't want to wear a navy sweater and then gray sweatpants because wearing a sweater and sweatpants doesn't really go together. So you want things to be unified too. So you want things to go together, and that's what we're going to try to do. Just doing a couple logo designs here, and we'll just work with text a little bit. I'll do one thing with the oak leaf and one thing with the maple. And also one thing to keep in mind with these is these have real round corners on these because we drew them, and these have sharp corners, so that may affect your decision as far as what kind of font you want to use with that. I'm going to stick to things very conservative. I'm going to try to stay with serif fonts, which are, like Times New Roman, like Garamond, things like that. Very conservative kind of wine label fonts, nothing over the top. Think about the audience of people who drink wine. You're not going to have things that look like they're geared to kids or anything like that. So it's a little more of a conservative kind of crowd or audience. And we could do anything with the logo. We could give it a color. We could make it white in a circle. We could do multiple logos, and you could give them different shades, things like that. I think I'll do both versions. So I'm going to start with the oak here, and you can make up any kind of name. I'm just going to do very basic stuff. Again, I'm on my logos layer here, so I'm just going to go here and take my text tool and click. And now it's coming up in a script font because I was messing around with some stuff, but it might just come up in your regular Open Sans. But whatever it comes up in, I'm just going to type Oak Hollow, and I'll just type Oak Hollow like that. And you could click on it with the pointer to see the whole thing, and you could still change the font with the pointer. So I'm going to go with kind of a serif font. Now I'm going to go up to the top. Now there's thousands, well, I don't know if there's thousands, there's hundreds of fonts here, and they're web fonts, so there may be fonts that you're not familiar with. You're not going to see your usual Adobe fonts and things like that, and that's a little frustrating. I've been going through them and making a list of some good serif fonts and some sans serif fonts to work with. They do have samples here, but sometimes that can get overwhelming. So I'm going to start off with something, I have a list, and one of the things on my list was, I think, Crimson Text or something, or Crimson Pro. And the reason I use that, and I'll just mention that, you might look at it and say, oh, well, that's boring. But when I click on this and I go to the style dropdown where it has regular, you can see it has all these different variations here, from extra light to heavy. This is what you want to see with a serif font. You want to see a nice family of fonts. So I'm going to stick with that first. I might even use something medium here, make it a little heavier, and it's a nice looking serif font. And I might even try like a medium metallic, something like that, give it a little classiness. And notice when you put a serif font in italic, it gets close to being a script font almost. So that's why we might look at script fonts a little bit. They'll be a little more decorative, a little more kind of connected in terms of the writing. You'll see all different kinds of script fonts. They could be painterly, they could look like a pen drew them, they could be very decorative, but I'm just going to start with something like this, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit so I can see what I'm doing here. Now, a couple things to note with text. If you grab the corner here and try to resize, it's going to resize the text box, and that doesn't really help you, so I'm going to undo that. Now, if you do want to resize the text box, you can use this transform button, and if you click on that temporarily, you can go on the corner here, and if you hold shift, it'll go in proportion. You could resize the box that way, and it'll resize everything in it. That's very helpful when you're doing design. Now, you could also do this. If I turn this off, you can also just use the point size here and go up and down. And notice when you go up and down, it'll resize the box with it. So that's helpful. So if you need to use the point size, and I'm holding down my mouse, I'm using a mouse right now, and I'm kind of going, up and down. And there's some other settings here we'll work with, but I'm just going to do something like that. That's it right now. Notice I'm not even paying attention to my leaf. I could bring a leaf over here if I want. There it is. And I could resize it. I'll make it nice and small. And I could stick it here. And just there is a nice little accent. And even if I don't want a gradient on it, I could go here and I'll just make it a wine color. Maybe I want to make it a little warm. I'll go into the oranges a little bit, and I'll go in here. Now be careful, because I just did this. Since it had a gradient on, it's staying in the gradient. So I'm just going to go to color fill and make it solid. And I'll go in here, and it's kind of a rusty kind of color that I have. And also I'll click on it and I'll use the trash can to take off the border. So something like that. Now, I may decide to go in here and make it a little more wine color. You could use this little slider here and go into the reds a little bit. And, that might be too red. I might want to go more dark, a wine color. That looks okay. So what I'm talking about is contrast. I have red and black. I have contrast right here. That's a nice contrast. And even though the leaf is going in that direction and the text is kind of going in that direction, it's okay. It creates a little tension. It creates a little, this goes that way, that goes that way. There's a little balance. You don't have to have everything going in one direction. Now, it is centered right now. So what I might do is just put some text on the bottom that just says winery. So I'm going to click on this and just hold my Option key or my Alt key and just drag it. So it says Oak Hollow again. I don't want to hit enter. I don't want to be in the same text box. Get out of the habit of doing that. It's hard to design like that. So make sure you have a separate text box here. And I'm going to highlight on this. And if you click in here and do Command A or Control A on Windows, you could highlight all that text. And I'm just going to type wineries. And unfortunately, they can't change it from caps to lowercase very easily unless you use the Pro version, which is disappointing. But anyway, I put it all in caps here. Now, I don't want it italic like that. That doesn't look good. There's no contrast. It's too much the same. Now, that's okay if it's the same, but they compete against each other if they're too much the same. Just like if you might not wear a blue sweater with the same color blue pants because it'll look like you have a uniform on. You wouldn't do something like that. You want to have a little contrast here. So there's no contrast. We want this to look different. So an easy way to make something look different is if you have a serif, use a different category of font. So instead of a serif font with the little feet on here, notice how they have the little serifs on there. I'm going to use a sans serif font, a plain font. You know, think of Arial, Helvetica, things like that. Now, they don't have all those plain fonts in here. And I think when I did this, I used something, it starts with an A. It's called like a Mika or something. Again, I have to get really familiar with these fonts. There's a Miko. I found a Miko, and it looked okay. I mean, you can look for something that looks really plain. I'm not sure about Anaheim. Anaheim's very plain, although it looks a little officey because it has kind of serifs on there. I don't know if that's exactly what I want. A little bit too techy. So, you know, that's why you have to look at these a little bit. But a Miko I thought was nice. It was a very nice, like a Franklin Gothic, kind of very plain font. Notice a very standard kind of straight R there. Now, you wouldn't go do something like that. And now, if you wanted to transform it, you can click on here, or you could use the font. You can use the font, make it a little smaller, and you might say, oh, I want to align it really nice. Now, alignment is also a design aspect. Having these things aligned or centered, I'm using kind of a centered layout here. Now, the problem is, we have contrast between this font and that font, except they're almost the same weight, and this one's kind of bigger. They compete. You know, you don't know where your eye goes first. You want Oak Hollow to stand out. You don't want wineries to be so big. So you might think, oh, well, I'm going to go and make wineries small. And I'll make it really small. Now, you could do something like that. Sometimes you might see logos that might do something like that. But we'd probably have to put the leaf over here to kind of get some movement going, kind of a left to right movement. But I'm not doing that right now, although you could certainly do something like that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to center it. Now, the problem with centering it right now is it looks kind of tiny. You know, it creates this gap on either side. What you can do is use something called the tracking and spread out the letters. Now, you wouldn't actually put spaces inside the letters, but they have something here. They call it character spacing. You might also hear it called tracking. It's right here. Now, you got to be careful because you don't know what it's using as far as increments, because I think it's based on the font. So the smaller font, the smaller the value you have here. So if you just go like throw something in there, it'll be gigantic and it'll spread out these letters. It's 1.4. So you might want to double click in here and try something like 0.1. And even 0.1 may be too much sometimes. You might have to go 0.0 something. Now, right now, 0.1 looks okay. I'm going to try 0.3, and that looks way too much. So I'll try 0.2. And again, it might vary based on how big you did this initially. But what I actually want to do is I want to center this like this and have that be nice and light with the tracking in it. Now I could go here and maybe make it 14 point. And that looks pretty good. I'm going to zoom in so I could see it better. And I'm going to move this. And that looks pretty good. I have a nice heavier serif in italic, and down here I have a very plain winery. So something stands out, something does not stand out. You don't want everything standing out. Even the leaf doesn't have to be so big. It's just supposed to be a little accent. Everything should kind of go together nicely, but there should be contrast and everything should kind of work together. Now, one thing you could do, I think on mine I threw a little line in here. So you could take the pen tool if you want and just click a line. Just click here, hold shift to make it straight, and then click. And then if you get this thing here, just double click to end it. I don't know if they have a straight line tool. It looks like I might have put another point there, but I think it's okay. And it's black right now. If I'd want to go to the eyedropper, I could actually sample that burgundy color and maybe make it 2 point, something like that. And I'll go back to my pointer. And that's okay. And except I have to go in here. I think I do have a anchor point in here, extra anchor point I have on there. And I just pulled it away and I'll just hit delete. And that'll work fine. It's kind of hard to grab onto, but I had to use my sub-select tool to do that. So that's all I need, and I think that looks okay. I mean, I don't want to do too much. I just want to make something subtle. If you think the font should be smaller, you could go smaller with the font, and even spread it out a little more. Sometimes you'll see little kind of decorative kind of things you could do with lines down here, but I don't want you to spend a lot of time, but I do want you to just kind of work with text and get familiar with it. You could try different fonts. You can do different things. Like I showed earlier, my example, I even did something like this, and I'll just kind of make a copy here. I'm just holding my Option key, and if you're on Windows, you'd hold your Alt key and making a copy over there. Now, another thing you could do, you know, is doing a negative kind of leaf. So if you made like a little oval here, and then you decided to put your leaf on top. Now, I can't see it right now, so I'm going to fill that leaf with white. Let me click on this and do a send to back. They have buttons here. Send element backwards. There it is. And now my leaf is white and it's in the front. Now you could make it bigger and make it even kind of expand outside of the box. You don't have to stay inside that oval. You could make a negative shape that kind of has an opening. You know, you've seen logos like that have kind of openings in them. Or you could make it a little smaller. Maybe that's not looking great like that. You could go a little smaller and just have an opening at the bottom. You could rotate it. Remember, they have this little thing here. So if you want to rotate it, make it maybe in the box, or in this oval, I should say, it looks a little straighter. You could do something like that. So you might have something where you might want to try something like that. Instead of just a leaf there, you know, this might look more like an icon or a logo. I can make it a little bit smaller, and you could do something like that. And again, some other design elements that we have in here are repetition. We have an O and O hollow. Now we have this oval here that looks kind of like the O a little bit. So that's another element of design. Repetition, you're repeating the same kind of elements. And we have some contrast because we have kind of a straight plain font here that sets off the other stuff. And again, whether you use a leaf or do that, you know, that's fine. So that's one idea here. So I think what I'll do is I'll take a break here, and you could play around with oak leaf ideas, and then for part 2 of this, I'll mess around with a couple maple leaf ideas, and then I'll put them on my bottle, and we'll finish that up. So I'll see you for part 2 of Wine Bottle Label.